Well, death is something we don't talk about too much, even though I was going to say most of us, all of us are going to die eventually, and we need to think about it. It's a part of our life. And today we have a very special guest in the studio. Diane Dennis came all the way from Portland to do this interview with us. A nurse, but
yes,
most recently author of a book called The Hourglass, How to Live as Time Flies By. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you
For being here. Time flies by, I should have said. Tell us about the history about this book. How did you come to write about it?
Yeah, a very strange way. I was offered, asked to come and speak to a support group because I wanted to write a book on resiliency and inspirations. And so I interviewed a psychologist, and she said, why don't you come to our support group? Everyone's inspirational there, and give a talk on resiliency. And of course I panicked, because how can I talk to women diagnosed with cancer about something that they know more than I do? So I threw in a bunch of jokes. and then I thought, well, that'll be it. And since it was a support group, hospital support group, and the privacy issues, I thought they would have me leave before they conducted their support group. They had me stay. And it was life-altering for me. The next morning I woke up and I said, this is a tribe of women, I want to know more. It was so emotionally moving. And as a nurse, having worked years in death and dying and illness, this was different. These were people telling the truth, non-competition, all of the barriers out of the way, talking about the most important thing, is their life.
Wow.
With each other.
So by listening about, tell us, what were their fears? What were the concerns of the women who knew they're gonna die sooner than they thought they would, that there was this cancer that was getting them closer to death?
Yes.
What was their fears?
The first thing is facing mortality. We don't face our mortality in this culture. And when you face because death is a scary thing, and when you face your mortality, all of a sudden your priorities change and your life changes. So their fears were, I might die soon. I don't want to leave my family. I want to be with them more. They all of a sudden, all of their priorities changed, and what they wanted to do most wasn't accumulate things or meet business goals. It was develop more emotionally intimate relationships. And I thought, oh my gosh, if we could all do that before we're diagnosed with a disease, that, you know, if we could look at life as if we're facing our mortality every day. That's why I named it The Hourglass.
Now, these women, they were in a support group, so it was a closed setting, they felt confidential, and then they shared something that they probably haven't shared with maybe even their loved ones.
Even their husbands. This is a disease that only affects women, and almost every one of them were married. And
we're talking about ovarian cancer.
Ovarian cancer, yeah. And so it was scary to talk about dying with somebody that doesn't want to lose you and that you don't want to say goodbye to. So they were in the support group talking about things they couldn't even, they felt restricted. They didn't want to cause their own family fear, so they were putting on, you know, a happy face and having hope, because there's always hope until the end. That you're going to, not everyone dies from cancer.
Did some of those women hide their disease from their husbands?
Good question. One did, and it was very traumatic because she hadn't prepared her family, and she was very matriarchal. She, you know, kind of ran the family business with her husband, and since she didn't share with them what she was going through, and she didn't seek treatment, her disease progressed very quickly, and her family was very distraught and upset, and I spent a lot of time in the hospital with all of them.
Wow. I would think, you've been a nurse, and you've probably faced cases when there were men and women dying. I would think that when a woman dies, probably some of the concerns she would have was, how is my family going to be without me? How are they going to survive? Who's going to cook meals? You know, all those everyday things that most women do. Have you noticed that men and women face death differently?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there's a pattern, and we had a hospice nurse come in talk about dying, and that was very painful. And the process, if you're dying of a disease rather than something getting hit by a bus or something, the process has certain characteristics like the birthing process. You have hope and you fight it, and of course with medical technology there's lots of ways to fight it, and most cancers end up being chronic illnesses, not terminal diseases these days, which is awesome. But as their body starts to shut down and they start to see the reality, and maybe the doctors tell them there's nothing else we can do, then they shift. and both men and women. And they shift towards looking at what they can hold on to, what they can do today. They live in the moment. They have really rich experiences, and their hope changes. All of their priorities change.
As far as the family members concerned, because when you think about terminally ill people, and especially those in the hospital, they get visitations, people come pray over them, people make their meals. I mean, they don't seem lonely, and yet in your book I saw that a lot of those women said that they were lonely. So there seems to be some kind of a disconnect, as if we have communication, but it's not the quality communication. Is that the case?
I think everyone puts on a happy face. Like if you take a meal to someone who has cancer, you know, you're kind of afraid to ask what stage you're in or how it's going. So you just make small talk because that's easier. And what these women did in the support group is they listened differently. They listened with their heart, and I think that's the difference, and that's what I wanted to bring forward about this book, is we all listen thinking of the next thing we're going to say. We're listening with our head. If we listen with our heart, we feel what the person's saying. And that's what they wished for. They wished more people would be open to listening to them.
Are there any kind of no-nos to what to never say to a dying person, or never do in front of a dying person?
The most important thing is to accept the stage they're at, in their own acceptance. They can be on their last day of living and not accepting that they're going to go, and so that's what we have to do, is accept them at where they're at.
Where did those women that you spent some time with, where did they get hope? Once, because you said that they had some rich experiences and they've redefined a lot of the things in life, and they've attached themselves to things that were eternal rather than the temporal, material ones. Where did they get hope?
That's exactly what I asked the hospice nurses. When the first patient was assigned a hospice nurse, I was angry because I was going through my own grief process. I had this fantasy thinking that everyone would live on my watch. And so I went to hospice and I sat down with the nurses and I said, you know, the hospice house was called Hopewell House. I thought, what an irony. What do you have to hope for? If you're assigned to hospice and sent to a home, what do you hope for now? And they go, oh, they never lose hope. I go, what are you talking about? They said, see, hope used to be, for me personally, wishful thinking. Their hope now is based on their current reality. They know they're going to die. They hope that the service that is given at their passing reflects what they want to say. They hope that they've said their goodbyes in meaningful ways. It's very painful. They hope that their loved ones will be okay without them. Yeah.
So faith, is that something that you've noticed? Because I know that the group that you were in, it wasn't a Christian group, so there must have been women of no faith or different faiths. How did that help them?
They all had different faiths, mostly, and but they were American, so mostly Christian. Different variations of strengths in their faith. But what I noticed is, as each of them were getting closer to dying, the things that don't matter of the ego, purchases, goals, possessions, slipped away. Even things that they had held tightly onto, slipped away, and their faith there was an opening. And in that space, their faith got stronger. Whatever their faith was got stronger.
You mentioned saying goodbye. I'm going to go back to that. How do you say goodbye? If you know that, and I'm sure there's somebody listening right now who has a mother, a brother, a relative, a friend who they know may go tomorrow, a week. How do you go to them and make that one meeting that potentially can be the last one be a meaningful one?
You want to make sure that you say all the things that are on your heart. So many people lose loved ones and they say, oh, I just wish I would have said I loved them one more time. Whatever it is you want to say it. And forgive. That's a really important piece before passing, is that if you hold on to any grudges about the person or they do for you, let go of them and love, just love. That's what people want in the end. And knowing, as people are dying of a disease, their body is shutting down and they are in pain. There is an element of pain and struggle. And when someone passes, you see the struggle stop.
Do those people who are dying from cancer or any kind of other disease, do they feel it was their fault? Do they feel responsible for their death?
Well, I hope we've come a long way in the medical training with that. There's a couple schools of thought that you could have prevented this if you lived a better life. You know, and that's holding on to something that we don't have any control over. I think the most important thing is they want to live in the moment. Sure, they want to know what causes it. A lot of it is genetic, and then they want to have their daughters and granddaughters tested to see if there's a genetic mutation that they can, you know, be proactive for and maybe do even prophylactic treatment or surgery. But you know, we just blaming ourselves doesn't really help. But there are proactive things we can all do with our health to do the best we can, and that's the best we can do.
Yeah. You know, when I asked you, when you came into the office and I asked you, what have you learned about death? I think this is how I phrased the question, and you said, well, actually, I learned a lot about life.
Yes.
And it seems like from the experience that you've shared in the book and with me earlier, is a lot of these things we can and we should apply in our real life, like saying goodbye, spending quality time with people. So as we wrap up this interview, what would be your message to those who are facing death, who are facing losing their loved ones, or even just the listeners that want to connect to the loved ones? What would be your message today?
I would say live in the moment. That's all we have. All of us live in the future. Future worries, future anxiety, future stress. What are we going to do? What vacation are we going on next year? We don't know. Just this moment's all we have. The future's a figment of our imagination.
And the book, I want to once again highlight it, The Hourglass, How to Live as Time Flies By Diane Dennis. What makes this book different? If you were to kind of highlight a few things from this book for people to do.
It's very emotional. People who read it cry. You know, there's fear. I think you face, and the chapters are set up that way, you face your own definition, and you have an opportunity to change your definition of hope, faith, your identity. Who are we? What do we want? And so it's a rich way, the lessons, a rich way to learn how to live.
And you definitely know what you're writing about, because you've been a nurse and now you're an author and spend so much time with these women who are dealing with cancer. So I would encourage you to get a copy of The Hourglass. It's available on Amazon.
Yes.
And it's just been published. So Diane Dennis, thank you so much for traveling all the way here.
Oh yeah, my pleasure. Great to meet you. Thank you.